The snow fell softly, blanketing the world in a pristine white glow. It was one of those rare evenings where silence wrapped itself around the landscape, as if the earth was holding its breath. The frozen lake stretched out in the distance, surrounded by bare trees whose branches sagged gently under the weight of fresh snow. Streetlights cast a warm golden hue on the cobblestone path that wound its way through the park, illuminating a trail of footprints that seemed to lead nowhere and everywhere all at once. The air carried the crispness of winter, mingled with a faint sweetness, perhaps from the nearby bakery, but above all, it carried something unspoken, something electric, something alive. Amelia pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders as she stepped onto the path, her gloved hands gripping a bouquet of lavender and daisies wrapped in brown parchment paper. Her auburn hair fell in soft waves, peeking out from beneath her knit hat. She didn't feel the cold. Her cheeks, flushed from the chill, burned not because of the weather, but because of the thought of him. He had asked her to meet him here, of all places. The park where they had first met, 3 years ago, during another snowfall like this one. It was almost too perfect to be real. Amelia's heart was a storm of anticipation, her steps quickening with every crunch of snow beneath her boots. She felt ridiculous, like the heroine of some whimsical romance novel, but wasn't that the charm of it? Of him? And then she saw him. Daniel stood under the gazebo at the edge of the lake, his silhouette framed by a cascade of fairy lights that flickered like stars. He wore a charcoal grey coat and a scarf that she had knitted for him last winter. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, his broad shoulders slightly hunched, but when his eyes met hers, his entire posture softened, and he smiled. It wasn't just any smile. It was his smile, the one that made her feel like the rest of the world could disappear, and she wouldn't care. "Hey," he called out as she approached, his voice warm and low like the crackle of a fireplace. "Hey," she replied, barely above a whisper, her breath visible in the frigid air. For a moment, neither of them moved. Snowflakes caught in Amelia's hair, and Daniel noticed the way they sparkled, like tiny stars resting on her. She held the bouquet a little awkwardly, her fingers tightening on the parchment. He noticed that too, and his lips curved into a teasing grin. "Flowers?" he asked, his tone light, but his eyes holding something deeper. "For you," she said, offering them to him, her cheeks growing impossibly red. It felt appropriate. Daniel chuckled, taking the bouquet with a gentle touch. He brought it to his face, inhaling the subtle scent of lavender, and nodded as if he'd just been given a priceless treasure. "I think these are the first flowers anyone's ever given me," he said, his voice tinged with wonder. "Don't get used to it," Amelia quipped, her smile breaking through her nerves. "Next time, you're getting socks. Hand-knitted, I hope." "Maybe," she teased, taking a step closer to him. The gazebo seemed to shrink as the distance between them disappeared. The world outside felt suspended in time, the snow swirling softly around them like a scene from a dream. Daniel reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. His touch lingered, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb tracing a faint line along her skin. "Do you have any idea how beautiful you look right now?" he murmured, his voice barely audible over the stillness. Amelia laughed softly, nervously, but her eyes stayed locked on his. "You always say that. And I'll keep saying it until you believe me." There was something in the way he looked at her, an intensity that made her feel both vulnerable and cherished, as if she was the only thing that mattered in his world. She felt her chest tighten, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had always been the pragmatic one, the one who didn't believe in grand gestures or serendipity. But with Daniel, everything felt different. With Daniel, she wanted to believe in magic. "I didn't just ask you here to give you frostbite," he said suddenly, his tone shifting, a flicker of nerves breaking through his usual confidence. "Oh?" Amelia arched an eyebrow, tilting her head. "Then why did you drag me out in the middle of a snowstorm?" Daniel laughed, but there was an edge to it, a slight tremor. He set the bouquet down carefully on the gazebo railing and took both of her hands in his, the warmth of his touch seeping through her gloves. "Because," he began, his eyes searching hers, 3 years ago, I met this girl who walked into my life with coffee stains on her shirt and fire in her eyes, and somehow she's turned my whole world upside down. You've made me laugh harder than I've ever laughed, and you've made me believe in things I never thought were possible. And now—" He dropped to one knee. Amelia's breath hitched, her hands flying to her mouth. The snowfall seemed to intensify, as if the universe itself was leaning in to witness this moment. Daniel pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a simple yet stunning diamond ring. It glinted softly in the light, but it was his expression that stole her breath, a mixture of hope, love, and just a touch of fear. "Amelia Rose Carter," he said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind around them, "will you make me the luckiest man alive and marry me?" Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't care. She nodded, her laughter breaking through the lump in her throat. "Yes," she managed, her voice shaking with emotion. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes!" Daniel rose to his feet, slipping the ring onto her finger before pulling her into his arms. Their lips met in a kiss that was soft and sweet and filled with every unspoken word they had ever shared. The snow fell harder, covering them in a blanket of white, but neither of them noticed. The world could have ended right then, and they wouldn't have cared. For in that moment there was only love, and it was everywhere, in the air, in the snow, in the flowers, and in their hearts.